Now that we've talked about triangles, which is a three-sided figure, now we're going to be talking about quadrilaterals, which is a four-sided figure. So the best way to explain this is in the form of a diagram. So a quadrilateral, first you have to know what a quadrilateral is, and it is just a four-sided polygon. And the sum of the interior angles is 360 degrees. So on a triangle, we know that it has 180 degrees. A quadrilateral is just two triangles put together. So it's 360 degrees. So if you added up all these angles, that's going to equal 360 degrees, and it's four sides. So after a quadrilateral, it's going to go into one of two groups. It's going to be a trapezoid, or it's going to be a parallelogram. So what is a trapezoid? A trapezoid, it's still a polygon. It's still a quadrilateral. It still has four sides, because everything that this has in common, everything has in common. So what you could say is that a trapezoid has one pair of parallel lines. And remember, parallel has these markings, so these guys are going to be parallel. So when you look at this drawing, the trapezoid has one pair of parallel lines. It also is a four-sided polygon, and it also has a sum of interior angles is 360 degrees. So all of these statements hold true for a trapezoid, okay? Now, you can be more specific, and you can go down a little bit, and another type of trapezoid is going to be an isosceles trapezoid. So, an isosceles trapezoid has one pair of parallel lines, and another aspect of this is that non-parallel sides are congruent. So, look at my picture. So this represents parallel, those two arrows, and this marking represents congruent. So an isosceles trapezoid still has a pair of parallel lines, non-parallel sides, it's a quadrilateral, and the sum of interior angles is still 360 degrees. And I'm rotating that way too much. Okay, now, so sometimes a shape just stops at a quadrilateral. Sometimes it can be divided into a trapezoid. Other times it can be in the form of a parallelogram. So what is a parallelogram? A parallelogram, still a quadrilateral, still the sum of interior angles is 360 degrees, and opposite sides are parallel. So if opposite sides are parallel, now I'm going to have parallel markings here, and I'm going to have parallel markings here. Notice these guys have one arrow because it's telling me that these two sides are parallel, and this guy has two triangles telling me these sides are parallel. So opposite sides are parallel, and opposite sides are congruent. So remember the congruent marks. These guys have one tick mark, these guys have two tick marks. So when you draw a picture, remember, a parallelogram. Opposite sides are parallel, opposite sides are also congruent, and it's still a quadrilateral, and it's still the sum of interior angles is 360 degrees. Okay, so sometimes a parallelogram can be classified even further. So if you look at this, a rhombus still holds all this to be true. Opposite sides are parallel, opposite sides are congruent, and not only are opposite sides congruent, all sides are congruent. So we already know opposite sides are parallel, but what makes a rhombus special is that all sides are equal. So every side is going to have one tick mark. Okay, so it still fits all these. Now, what about a rectangle? Okay, well, a rectangle, not only are opposite sides parallel, we know that. Opposite sides are parallel. Opposite sides are congruent. We know that as well because it has all of these markings. And a rectangle, the additional one, is that all angles are 90 degrees. So we can now add the markings of 90-degree angles. So a rectangle still has all the properties of a parallelogram, still has all the properties of a quadrilateral. Now a square is super, super special because, look at this. It's a four-sided polygon. The sum of interior angles is 360 degrees. Opposite sides are parallel. Opposite sides are not only congruent, but they're like a rhombus. So a square is a combination of a rhombus and a rectangle together because now all sides are congruent just like a rhombus. All angles are 90 degrees just like a rectangle. And the diagonals, actually, if you drew a diagonal, they would form 90 degrees there. Okay? So a square is a rhombus plus a rectangle. So that's a very, very special shape. So that's just an overview of quadrilaterals.